The House of Representatives passed the disastrous budget bill that we discussed on the show yesterday. The Senate is debating it today. In fact, Congress had to pass a 2-day funding bill to keep the government open to avert the shutdown, just to allow themselves to continue to debate it. So the bill, as passed by the House, is a disgrace. It cuts Pell Grants for education. Again, we covered that yesterday. It also cuts the few homeless programs that we have in the United States of America. That's also terrible. But there are two provisions in the bill that are above and beyond a slap in the face to the American people, and there's significant outrage over this today, which is a good sign in terms of the response to the bill. The first one guts the few campaign donor laws that we have left in the United States of America. So for those of you who have been following this closely, you know that there were a series of Supreme Court cases in the 1970s and onwards, whether we're talking about Bilotti or whether we're talking about Buckley versus Vallejo, and of course the recent ones, Citizens United, and McCutcheon. And what those did is they basically said, all right, well, let's go ahead and kick up the limit for contributions to individual politicians and campaigns and super PACs, or in some cases, flat out eliminate any cap on the amount of money that people can give to those different individuals and those different organizations. And of course, that increases corruption in politics because you have billionaires and Wall Street and multinational corporations and lobbyists who then flood in and give even more money to the politicians, and naturally they're expecting something in return, and they get whatever they want in return for the most part. Well, there were a few limits left, and some of the limits were for contributions to political parties. So if you wanted to give a contribution to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, there was a cap for yearly spending at $32,400. Now understand something, you're already doing a legal bribe at that point. If you're an individual and you go to the Democratic Party and say, here's a check for $32,400 and you could use it however you like for this upcoming election, what's going to happen? Well, the Democratic Party is going to know, okay, that guy's a player, and that guy, whenever he wants to call a senator, he wants to call a congressman, he has an issue that he wants to discuss, whether it's a special tax break or a subsidy, okay, we're going to look out for that guy because he just gave us $32,400. I don't know about you guys, but if somebody signs a check of $32,400 over to me, I kind of like the person, and I'm going to listen to him. Well, now they decided, and this is what was jammed into this new budget deal, they decided to move the decimal point, allowing contributions now of up to $324,000 to the political parties. Wow. Now, it just struck me today as I was reading about this. This didn't occur to me yesterday and the day before when we had this preliminary information, but it didn't click. I realized, why did they pick that number specifically? They did it because they didn't want to get caught. All they did was move the decimal point over and call it a day, and they sat there with their fingers crossed like, I hope the press doesn't realize it. I hope people who are following us, government watchdog groups, don't realize it. I hope they don't understand that we just further legalized bribery and corruption in United States politics. Well, people did realize, and now it's a gigantic story. So now that's in the bill, and it passed the House of Representatives. The most brazen, open corruption you've ever seen in your life. It passed the House of Representatives. Also, there's word out today that President Obama supports it, establishment Democrats support it, of course establishment Republicans support it. So it appears as if this bill is going to get through. Now, again, to be clear, it hasn't gone through the Senate yet, and it hasn't been signed by the president yet, but it was passed by the House of Representatives last night. And let's not forget the other provision, which is a slap in the face to the American people. Now, again, they jammed this in the bill. They made it mandatory that the taxpayers have to bail out Wall Street, have to bail out the big banks if there's a crash in the derivatives market. Now, this was one of the few protections in Dodd-Frank financial reform which actually did something good and actually did something strong, and said, well, let's not have the taxpayers on the hook for another bailout. Let's look out for them. From now on, you're on your own, investment banks and big banks, if you want to do this risky version of betting. Well, they decided, fuck it, let's take that out now because who cares? The stock market's up, times are good, and we're bought off by these lobbyists who represent these big banks and these investment banks, so why the fuck not? Let's take it out. Again, that passed, that's in the bill. The few financial protections that we have, there's a continuing crisis of deregulation where they say, we don't care, we're going to take it out, and it's going to fall to the American people when the shit hits the fan. I don't think it's just a question of if it does. It's a question of when it does. Of course we're in another bubble right now. Of course this is another boom-bust cycle. Of course we're going to have another great recession and/or depression. Of course at some point there's going to be another stock market crash. What do we think? Growth is endless? It's going to continue to grow forever? Nonsense. And now American middle-class families are going to feel the pain when it goes bad. Now, understand, I was tweeting about this earlier. When you look at this from a common sense perspective and you really kitchen table the idea, you see how absurd it is. Stop and think for a second if in this bill they put in that if McDonald's goes belly up, you need to bail out McDonald's. The taxpayers need to bail out McDonald's. If the NBA goes belly up, we need to bail out the NBA. If your local deli goes belly up, the government needs to bail it out. If your dry cleaners goes belly up, the government needs to rush in and save it. They're putting that in the bill. Now, in that context, it sounds ridiculous, right? I mean, whatever, let's say you're a small business owner, whatever small business you own, me, SecularTalk. Okay, when SecularTalk goes belly up, government has to rush in and save me. It seems ridiculous in that context, right? So why is it any different for derivatives? If a financial institution decides to take risky casino capitalist bets and they lose, which as any gambler knows, eventually you lose, why should we have to rush in and save them? And by the way, they no longer have an incentive to make the money on their own because they know that if it goes belly up, the taxpayers are going to be there to save them. It's the same old trick that we've seen time and time again. They are privatizing the profits and socializing the losses. And as we discussed yesterday, any real conservative should be against this. Because the whole idea, or at least one of the definitions of conservatism, is a belief in small government. Well, if you believe in small government, then why would you believe in socialism for the rich? Why would you believe in continued socialism for the elite, for the banksters? You wouldn't believe in it, right? If you're a true capitalist, you know what that means? It means rugged individualism. It means it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, survival of the fittest. If your business is the best, congratulations, you're rich, well done. But if you fail, and the taxpayers are not going to be there to save you. So why is it that the rules of the game are different for the people on Wall Street? And in fact, I have to give credit to the Tea Party wing of the Republican Party because they also voted against this. There was an alliance of progressives and Tea Party Republicans who got together and said, no, not on my watch, not on our watch. We're not going to let this happen. And of course, it was the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats who barely eked out a victory for this bill, and now it's going to the Senate, and then it'll probably end up on the president's desk. Understand something. If this bill gets through in its current form, there's no debate about it. The conversation is over. We can say for sure, as Bernie Sanders said earlier, that it's not the case that Congress regulates Wall Street. A lot of people think that's what happens, but it's not. Wall Street really regulates Congress.